Labor pains? Go to the hospital. I'm traveling with my mom. Call me when the baby is born.
My husband took off to Hawaii with my mother-in-law, leaving me in pain. A few days later, he called me to ask if the baby was born. I told him the truth.
Huh?
I heard his dumb voice, so I hung up the phone. I am Lara, a 28-years-old office worker. My husband Harry is also 28, and we got married 2 years ago after an office romance. My in-laws live in the next town, but Harry was the second son, so he told me before we got married that he didn't think it would mean living with his parents. When I asked him about other details, he told me that his mother was traditional and prefers her first son. And there was a considerable difference in the treatment of Harry and his older brother. So Harry did not seem to like much a family. In fact, at the time our wedding greetings, my mother-in-law said, "The eldest son will take over this house, so don't count on the inheritance of the family." I had never counted on it in the first place, but after hearing this, I had not a good impression on my in-laws. At the time, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law lived alone at my parents' house because my father-in-law was working alone overseas, and when we visited them, my mother-in-law was like, "I have to cook dinner and do laundry for your brother. So can you go home as soon as you are done here?" Harry apologized to me on the way home every time for his mother-in-law's attitude. However, a turning point came to us. Harry's elder brother had eloped with his fiancée and disappeared. My mother-in-law had a big problem with my eldest son's fiancée and said something like, "As the eldest son's wife and my daughter-in-law." She pressured her and made fun of her. My mother-in-law was very much against the marriage, but her first son decided to leave my mother-in-law to protect his fiancée's mental health and to marry her peacefully. This led the mother-in-law to turn the brunt of her affection toward Harry.
At first, I didn't like the fact that she was leaning on me because my brother was gone. It is like as if I replaced my brother.
And he refused to accept such an attitude from his mother. However, his mother tried to win Harry over in every way she could, and Harry gradually softened his attitude toward her. And so, a few months after the eldest son disappeared, he was saying,
"My brother is the worst kind of man. He has caused trouble to my mom so many times. And now that is how he is returning the favor. I'm ashamed to be a brother to such a man."
I was glad that his relationship with my mother-in-law had been restored. But I began to feel a little uneasy about him taking her side any longer. Harry and I were in the same company, so we had the same days off, and we often spent holidays together. However, Harry began to go out to his mother's house every holiday, as his mother invited him.
I feel sorry for my mom, because my dad is having an affair, and my brother is away. So I want to spend my holiday with my mom as much as possible.
That's what he told me. I understand how you feel, but I want you to spend more time with me as a couple.
We go back to the same house on weekends, and it would be fine if we could at least use the time off for mom. I mean, Lara, come with me.
Have you forgotten how you were told to get the hell out of there before? Or how you were treated so evilly? Besides, your mother wasn't very welcoming me.
Things were different then. So how long are you going to talk about the past?
Harry's comment surprised me, but I had seen his change and decided to accompany Harry on his visit to my parents-in-law's house in the faint hope that perhaps my mother-in-law's attitude towards me might have changed as well. On the following holiday, when I visited my in-law's house with Harry, I realized that I had been naive. My mother-in-law met us at the front door, and upon seeing my face, she blatantly frowned at me. I immediately realized that I was not welcome. But Harry, who was completely oblivious to the situation, told his mother smilingly that I wanted to spend the holiday with him. So that's why he brought me along.
Oh, Lara, you must be tired from work. Why don't you take a good rest? I'm working too, Mom. And Lara has enough energy to play around, so don't worry about it.
Harry's good-tempered words made my mother-in-law smile, as if she was up to something. And this expression was not my imagination, but rather my mother-in-law began to say various things to me.
My body has been hurting lately, and I can't even clean properly. Lara, can you clean the house for me?
At first, it was just this kind of request, but gradually her demands escalated. She began to send me out to buy groceries, arrange gifts for relatives, and even clean my mother-in-law's friend's house. While I was dealing with my mother-in-law's request, Harry and my mother-in-law were firmly enjoying their holidays, going out to eat, to the movies, to massage, and so on. After the first few times, I told Harry, I'll stop going to your parents' house because all I do is help your mother, and you go out with her, so there's no point in going.
As a wife, you could at least help out at your husband's parents' house. Besides, we go to their house and leave the house together. And in return, I'm taking you out to dinner.
So he refused my suggestion of not accompanying him to his mother's house. He says dinner, but it was only the same fast food restaurant. However, I couldn't disagree with his opinion because I indeed am the daughter-in-law, and ended up helping out at my in-laws' house on my days off, which meant I couldn't rest at all. The reason I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house was not only this, but also something else. Mindless words from my mother-in-law and Harry.
You were so cheerful when you were playing with me, so stop being so grumpy when you were helping my mother. Harry's ex-girlfriends used to smile at me all the time. The only reason you couldn't come to dinner with us in the first place was that you were too slow with your cleaning and stuff. How can you do your job like that?
Harry and my mother-in-law not only blamed me or my work, but also my parents.
How in the world did your parents educate Lara to be so slow at house chores? Even the last time I asked to arrange a gift for my relatives, you chose something that made me feel as if our house was poor. I had been asked to send gifts to her relatives, and my mother-in-law had asked me to pay for them. You always live on Harry's money, so you should pay for at least on an occasion like this.
She forced me to do so. We both work, so we live on our salaries together.
Are you saying that Harry's salary isn't enough?
No, it's not like that. My mother-in-law and I had a conversation in which she twisted my words, so I gave up the dialogue with her and followed her instructions about the gift. However, when out of the relatives who received the gift commented to me to thank me, my mother-in-law now started complaining about the kind of gift of what I sent them. My salary is not that much, so I couldn't send anything too expensive. But if it should be appropriate for you, I still think it would be better for you to choose the gift and pay for it from now on. As expected, I was also mad at my mother-in-law's unreasonable complaint, so I talked back. My mother-in-law still wanted to say something.
That's why I hate poor people.
And so she ended the conversation. My mother-in-law seemed to have told the story to Harry.
What did you say to Mom? You want money from her?
Harry was not in a good mood. She didn't like the gift I arranged for her relatives and called me poor, so I just asked her to make her own arrangements next time.
My mom just tried to teach you how to get along with your relatives as a wife later on, so she asked you to do so.
I've never met these relatives, and they didn't even congratulate me on my marriage. I can't send such an expensive gift to many households, and who is only a relative to my husband. Harry sighed deliberately in response to my reaction and said,
I'll pay for now on, and you will arrange it next time again.
No, I won't. I simply answered him, went into the bedroom, and broke off the conversation. I had somehow sensed that my relationship with Harry was cooling down, and I knew I had to do something about it. But soon, I found out that I was pregnant. When I told Harry about the pregnancy, he was so happy that I was surprised by his reaction.
I'm going to work harder for you and the child, so if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know right away.
He stopped going back to my in-laws' house for a while and did house chores on his days off to take care of me, which made me very happy in the early stages of my pregnancy, as I had been feeling lonely about Harry's attitude. And then I reported to my mother-in-law as well as my father-in-law, who was working alone overseas.
I'm coming home once to celebrate.
He was going to visit me. My mother-in-law was very eager to know the sex of the child, and she repeatedly said,
Since this is your first child, you must give birth to a healthy boy and raise him to be the heir to our family.
When I found out the sex of the child was a boy, I wondered whether or not to tell Harry and my mother-in-law. Then, when I was in a stable stage of pregnancy, I visited my parents' home again. And at that time, my mother-in-law said,
If it's a boy, we'll take him in, and I'll raise him myself. My grandchildren will be happier if they are raised by me, who raised my two sons well, than by a mother like you.
Harry was also impressed by her words.
Lara, you have to work, and if my mom takes care of the child, you can focus on your work and work hard again.
I felt a sense of crisis at this time and decided to say, The child is a girl. I immediately lied. Then my mother-in-law looked at me with obvious displeasure and said,
Then, you should take care of it yourselves, because I have no obligation to raise a girl. Next time, have a boy.
I was stunned by this statement from my mother-in-law, but I remember feeling somewhat relieved that she would not interfere with me in any way. After this pregnancy report, my mother-in-law requested I help her do the chores.
Since you got in the stable period, come and clean our house.
However, I avoided this request by lying that I was suffering from morning sickness. And I did my best to avoid any contact with my mother-in-law during the pregnancy.
Since my mom is going to be a grandmother, it would be better for you to have a good relationship with her now. For the sake of the child, wouldn't it?
You're saying something like this so easily, but she hates me, I answered shortly to Harry, who once again began to take my mother-in-law's side, and Harry started going out to his parents' house again every other weekend. And this, although it was so close to the due date.
Once the baby is born, I won't be able to spend as much time with my mom. So I want to save some time to spend alone with her while I still can.
They even made plans for a trip to Hawaii. The baby will be born soon, and we cannot predict the due date so exactly. So please don't go on a trip overseas. I asked Harry repeatedly, but he would not listen to me at all. And I decided to tell my parents about the whole situation in case of an emergency. The reason I had not talked to my parents before was that if I told them, they would surely recommend divorce. And I wanted to avoid that option because I was hopeful of repairing the situation for the better. Then, a few weeks before my due date, I had tremendous contractions. Coincidentally, Harry and my mother-in-law were scheduled to leave for Hawaii in the evening, and my contractions started before noon, so I felt bad that their trip would be cancelled. But I asked Harry to take me to the hospital because I was having contractions. Harry rushed to take me to the hospital.
Does that mean you were going to have the baby today?
He asked the doctor.
It's prodromal labor, so it's not going to happen right away, but in a few hours.
He heard the doctor's reply to that point.
You're at the hospital. If anything goes wrong, it won't be a problem. Call me when the baby is born. I've been on the phone with my mom for a while now, rushing me to hurry up.
He walked away from the hospital, ignoring the doctors' and nurses' attempts to stop him. I was so disappointed in Harry's behavior. In my dazed state of consciousness, that I immediately contacted my parents. I could not give them the details of the situation, but my mother rushed to the hospital, and my father arrived later too, as my husband was not there at the time of labor. And I delivered a healthy baby boy later that day. While at the hospital, during my recovery, I explained to my parents what had happened, and they were, of course, furious and wanted me to get a divorce right away. On the third night after the birth of my child, I received a call from Harry.
I couldn't call easily because of the time difference. Is it time for the baby to be born?
Your daughter is no longer with us.
What do you mean?
I gave birth to a boy, so I never had a daughter in the first place. I suddenly remembered the lie I had told at the time, and decided to shock Harry and my mother-in-law. I can't live with you anymore, Harry. How could you go on an overseas trip at a time like this?
We don't need a wife who can't even bear a child.
I could hear his mother yelling behind him. Harry was putting the phone on speaker to listen to me, with his mother about the birth of our child. I decided to put mine on speakers as well for my parents and to record the conversation. So, do you agree that we'll get divorced? I didn't recognize you as my daughter-in-law at all, to begin with. So you made a complete stranger pay for the gifts for your relatives.
Don't talk to me like I'm a hustler.
Then please return the money.
I'll return such a small amount of money, you miser.
My parents got angry when they heard what my mother-in-law said.
You haven't even had a child yet. And you're brazen enough to call yourself my daughter-in-law.
I had a child, and it's a healthy boy. I will raise him well, so it's none of your business.
A boy? Then he is the heir of our family.
My mother-in-law's voice brightened a little at my words, and I couldn't endure anymore. That's not true. You've talked so many things about me, and you were so brazen as to make my son your heir. Please hear the rest from the lawyer after you come back to the States. I hung up the phone, listening to my mother-in-law and Harry ranting over the phone. Then, after leaving the hospital, I immediately returned to my parents' house and started to prepare for the divorce. With the help of my parents, I got a lawyer. Upon hearing this news, my father-in-law paid a visit to my parents' house before Harry and my mother-in-law returned, and I let him listen to the record of the phone call of the other day and explain how I have been treated by them. He also went to the maternity hospital and had the doctor who had treated me explain to him about Harry's behavior. A few days later, when they returned home, I met them together with my father-in-law and my lawyer and started a discussion even before they could settle down. Here, I demanded a divorce and child support from Harry.
If we knew the child is a boy, we would not have treated my dear daughter-in-law Lara like that.
My mother-in-law continued.
What do you mean by that kind of treatment?
That's what my father-in-law asked my mother-in-law. And as expected, she was reluctant to talk about what she had said and done. So she clammed up. I couldn't mention everything to him, but I let my father-in-law listen to the recording of the phone call of the other day, so you don't have to hide it.
You recorded it? What a nasty person you are! How dare you say that? You're talking about heirs, but this family is not that traditional. No, it doesn't need one.
My father-in-law shouted at her. Harry had been mumbling something to take his mother's side. Harry, you were the second son. So why don't you just shut up?
That has nothing to do with the situation right now.
He raised his voice loudly.
No, it has. I will sell this house, and money will be inherited by my eldest son. I'm going to cut ties with bloodless people like you.
Do you mean my boy is coming back? Harry seemed to be astonished at his mother's joy at the mention of her eldest son's name. And since then, he stopped talking to support his mother. I figured it was my mother-in-law's problem from here. So I decided to live with my lawyer. And a few days later, the divorce was finalized. And I was off to a fine start in life as a single mother. Apparently, my father-in-law really did sell off his house and sent my mother-in-law back to her parents' house. Then he went back to work overseas. He had been giving her quite a bit of money for living expenses. But after hearing about the incident of gifts for the relatives, he cut that living expense down to a much smaller amount. And my mother-in-law started working part-time at her own family's company. Harry first tried to take his mother under his wing.
Because of your wife, I was evicted from my home, which was my only connection to my eldest son, and then it was sold.
He was broken-hearted when his mother told him that. I explained the situation to the company and asked to work shorter hours. So the story of Harry and I's divorce spread throughout the company. And since one of the employees' mother was a nurse working at the maternity hospital, word of Harry's behavior also spread, and now he's feeling very ashamed of himself. As for me, I'm back at home, a little farther from the office. But my parents were excited about their first grandchild or taking care of my baby. And I'm trying to rebuild my life while raising him comfortably. I have made up my mind that if I ever remarry and give birth to a second child in the future, I will raise this child with lots of love and without discrimination.